This is the Koori Knockout Podcast, and if you love your knockout yarns, you love old school footy, you love the good stories from the past, this is the spot for you. Make sure you're liking, you're subscribing and following us on all platforms, across our podcast platforms, across YouTube, because we've got plenty more episodes coming. Be the first to get it. Today we've got a special guest on the podcast. We've got Gavin Badger with us today. The first, the last and the only, the best Aboriginal NRF that we've had, the best referee that we've had in the NRL, and I'm not being biased when I say it. I reckon you're the best referee that I was able to play footy with. I think that your understanding of players, your rapport with players, and the way that you ref the game, I think it made for a better viewing product. And again, I'm probably being a little bit biased knowing you now, but you were. I don't think I'm lying there.
We've heard that comment from a lot of people. Like a lot of the boys used to say, and I remember the era before your refereeing, they were real disciplinarians. I'd say a lot of them would have worked in the police or been school teachers, and they would have come into refereeing rugby league with that same approach. Where I found when I was refereed by you, you're always working with the players to have the best outcome, to deliver the best product, to give the fans the game they want to see and let the players' skills shine. And I always remember you talking to us about, come on, mate, get on side, a couple more metres, you're not got to get there, and just working with players. Would that be a fair thing to say with your style?
Yeah. Firstly, thanks for having me on, and thanks for that kind intro. You're right. Like and like you say there, with the school teachers and coppers coming through, there was a lot when I was coming through as a referee. At all levels, and they say the best to ever do it. Billy Harrigan was a copper, so and he was very much a disciplinarian. And I tried to be a little bit different than that. Like, coming from where I come from, around that Waterloo Redfern area, and particularly refereeing in a really strong A grade competition and like a tough A grade competition, like that wouldn't have worked. I remember games where refereeing all but Robbie Walsh, Big Rob. If I'd have tried to tell him what to do, you give me a backhander, you know what I mean? So I had to sort of work out another way to do that and to try and be the best I could be. And for me, it was trying to stay out of it as much as I can.
Now, you're one of the fittest blokes I know.
Yeah.
Tell us about your training regime as a young bloke to make it as a referee. What was the skill that you had? Because I've known that, and there is a lot of young Indigenous referees, and we'll talk about that later. But for you, as a young guy coming through, what was the attribute you reckon helped you the most? Was it because you were so dedicated to your training, you're so fit? Was it your personality, or was it your determination to become a referee?
Yeah, it's a weird. I think my personality sort of plays a big part into it, because I've never really taken myself seriously, and I think that helps with that when you talk about player rapport and that. So, on the footy field, if I'm not thinking that I'm bigger, better, or whatever than anybody else, and I can have a laugh at myself when it's there, I think that helps. The fitness side, like NRL referees are elite athletes. Like I know we can sit at home, we want to bag referees a lot, and how do they get that wrong? But NRL referees in particular, not only elite, to referee rugby league it's the hardest sport in the world to officiate at. There's so many different variables and factors to do, and I don't think coming through, like I've been lucky enough that I've been reasonably naturally fit, and but I never really took that seriously until I sort of got towards the NRL level. And I remember, speaking to Bill Harrigan, who they say was the greatest to do it, and he said you need to stand out some way. You know what I mean? He goes, refereeing's subjective. People will make decisions, and put you in games based on what they think of you. So I thought, well, how am I going to stand out? I thought, I'm going to be the fittest one there. I'm just going to push myself and do whatever it takes to be the fittest, because then I stand out for something. And, in the end, it gave me probably a few more years in refereeing that I probably deserved, just because of the fitness side of it.
That's amazing. So what was it that made you decide to be a ref in the first place? Because, I know you've got a bit of a sporting background as well. How did you decide to become a ref?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty cool story. I played I started playing footy at Zetland. I think I was 3 or 4 when I first started playing footy. And we had a pretty good footy side, and there's a lot of players that come out of that side that played for Australia. Terry Hill played in that side, Darryl Trindle. At the back end when I left, Jimmy Dimmick was in that footy team, and we won comps, 6 or 7 comps in a row undefeated and stuff like that. And then we got to a point where we sort of went a little bit more. So a few of us went and played for Rovers, and then we had that bit of a rivalry there. And then I was sort of off the rails a bit, at 17, 18, I sort of was roaming the streets a bit and doing stuff that you probably shouldn't be doing. And I actually bumped into my old footy coach, Neil Lewis, who was our coach at Zetland for a long time. And he was an old fella, and he'd started refereeing just to stay involved in the game and keep fit. And I reckon, and you know, you talk about like sliding doors moments, and I reckon he saw something where he knew I was in a bit of trouble, and he said, "Why don't you come and try and do this?" And I probably can't repeat what I said to him at first. I hated referees when I was playing and stuff. But for some, and I still don't know why I turned up to. They were running the 6-week referees course, and it was the last week of it. So I missed the whole thing, and it was like, come in and we'll just do the test and see if you can pass. And I went in, did the test and passed. I was a bit of a footy, and I knew a fair bit about footy.
Yeah.
And I remember then, you know, sort of getting involved, and I fell in love with it straight away. And I'm going to sound a bit, you know, up myself a bit here, but it was something as soon as I did it, I knew I was good at it.
Yeah.
You know, many how something I just went, I think I'm good at this. I think this, and I was, like you say, I was always okay at sports. Like I made sort of rep teams here and there at different sports, but I was never good. You know, I mean, I was never going to be an athlete and I always wanted to be an athlete. And I thought, well, here's an opportunity to do something at a high level.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so when you first made your NRL debut, what was the process then from when you decided to be a referee and then the pathway that you went to get from A-grade referee through to NRL?
It's about a 15-year process, and that's the norm, which is very, you think about it, on par with players. So as referees, you don't start till later.
Yep.
So I didn't start refereeing till I was 18, about 18. But most people start playing when they're 5, right? By the time you're 20, you're playing first grade. So it's a 15-year process. Yeah. So it's very similar. So it's the same thing. I remember my first ever game. I still remember my first ever game. It was down at Pioneer Park. It was under 6s. It was Redfern All Blacks and South Eastern. And I remember...
it wouldn't have been a rivalry between Redfern and South Eastern.
No, probably not back then as much. Yeah. But I actually remember there was a stink in the crowd with the parents and stuff like that. And there was a bit of a drama with the score, and you know, I had people yelling at me and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, I'm doing this again. What am I doing this for? You know what I mean? And 18-year-old, I just started going out at night. Or I'd been doing it for a couple of years. But yeah, you got to be out at Pioneer Park. I was living in Waterloo at the time. Got to be out at Pioneer Park at 8:30 in the morning. You know, I had to get I didn't have a license. I had to get my mum to drive me and stuff like that. I'm thinking, what am I doing this for? You know what I mean? But yeah, I stuck with it, and you know, got to a pretty cool lifestyle, and you know, some really cool opportunities out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were there refs that you looked up to as you're progressing through the ranks? And
not really. Never anyone that was at the elite level, but. So I've never met my father, so I've never had a father figure in my life. I've never had like really good male role models. But when I got into refereeing, I had these people that were invested in me being better. I mean, like I said, Neil Lewis was the first person that sort of, as a footy coach, and then in refereeing, was someone that I sort of looked up to. So I got to a point where I didn't want to let these people down. So I said, when I first started refereeing, if I'm going to be completely honest, I'd be out all night and then from nightclub to go and referee games and stuff like that, you know, when I was, you know, 18, 19, when I first started doing it.
Yeah.
But then I started to get, you know, well, I don't want to let these fellas down. So I started to take it a bit more seriously. And a lot of what I learned as a human, as a man, I learned through being around those people. So not that I had idols, but they, you know, a lot of people that when I first started refereeing, when you know, I was 18, 19, 20, those years where you start to work out what kind of person you're going to be, I learnt from those people that were at South Referees Association.
Well, let's talk about the nitty-gritty of being an NRL referee, because I know you touched on it before. They're the most scrutinised people in the game. They're hated by both teams. Whoever goes to watch the footy, both sides hate them. But it's the hardest job on that field. Out of everyone that's out there, it's the hardest job on the field. Can you explain exactly why it's the hardest job and break down how many Ks you're doing, the amount of things that you've got to look at in a single play of the ball, all that sort of stuff? I know I've heard you talk about it before, and it blew my mind. I always thought that you had a tough job, but that really hit home for how hard the job is as a ref. Yeah,
so officiating, you know, it's crazy. Like, you get a lot of other, and I love a lot of sports, but a lot of sports when you're officiating, it's matter of fact. Like in the NFL, right? It's a very stop-start game because the laws are based on matter of fact. You've got to get this yardage. If you go out, you know, it's all, there's not a lot of grey area. Soccer's the same, rugby union's the same, but when you get rugby league, you've got, not only do you got to judge a distance, so you've got to judge 10 metres every time yourself, right? Not only do you got to judge, you've got to judge a speed of what's happening in a play of the ball, right? So there's a speed to that. And you've also got to judge what happens in that play of the ball as well. As in an NRL game, is average 365 play of the balls. There's something like 150 decisions that could happen in each play of the ball. Not that it does, But and the whole time you've got to be talking and stuff like that. And the speed of that game, we run about, depending on the ground, the game, you can anywhere between 9 to 12, 13 Ks a game.
Wow.
At high heart rate levels with the pressure and scrutiny of everything, you know what I mean? And the heart rate sits up pretty high, gets a bit higher when you see a decision on the screen that you got wrong, you know what I mean, which happens. And players in your face, and some better than others, some you worry about more than others, but and then having to worry, in particular, when I first started coming through, it wasn't as bad, but now you've got the social media age, you've got, every night on TV there's a rugby league show, all over radio, they've got to fill time. So when there's nothing else to talk about, they'll go after.
The refs is an easy target, yeah.
What's the enjoyable parts of the ref badge when you're out there?
Yeah.
Like, as a player, when your team's doing well, you actually love the game. You're really enjoying. There's nothing better than being on a footy field when your team's doing well. Where do referees get enjoyment out there? Is it knowing you made good decisions? Do you get to enjoy the game, watching the star players so closely and seeing them do so? Is that the fun part?
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost surreal. Like, everything seems to happen in slow-mo. You know what I mean? Like you'll get off the game and go, oh, what happened there? You know what I mean? Like, there's games that come up on TV now that, those old games, and I have no idea what happened in them, but then something will happen. I go, I remember that moment. You get enjoyment out of, we're all rugby league fans, the first thing. Like, no one wakes up and says, I want to be an official in a sport. What sport am I going to choose? It happens that you love a game and you go, I want to stay involved. How can I be involved in this game? And then if you don't love the game, you don't do it. Like, you wouldn't get up, like I said, on a Sunday morning and pouring rain down in the middle of nowhere down at Yarra Oval or Waterloo Oval. You wouldn't do it. And then, when you get to the elite level, it's about that. It's about coming off the field and knowing that you've had an impact in a great game of the game that you actually love. I mean, you actually have an impact on how that game's played. It's for me, when I think about that, as that kid running around, Waterloo Oval playing footy, and to think that I would have a pretty big impact on the way the game's played at an elite level.
As a referee, can you tell which team's got the ascendancy at any time? Because, the Broncos are a great side. They're right on top of you. I can feel it. They're on top of you and everything. Or are you just that focused on your job?
No, you can. You can. That's a big part of being a good referee. I reckon know them. I reckon, and I never got to do it at an elite level with the six again and stuff. I reckon that sort of might change that. You probably don't get the feel of it. But there's times in games where teams have been down, like those great teams, the Broncos and stuff, where they might be down by 2 or 3 tries, but you go, there's something happening. They're coming at them. You know what I mean? So you got to make sure that, because what happens in games when teams blow out, sometimes as a referee you try to look after the team that's getting beat a little bit, like tight calls, or you might not jump into them on a slowish ruck because you're thinking, I'm beating a dead horse here. But when you're getting those momentum games and stuff like, you go, you know what? I can't jump into this one because they're coming at them. It's just that feel for the game.
What about players? Did you ever admire a play? What do you think when Big Georgie Rose is charging the ball up off the kick-off?
He actually owes me a little bit, actually. That game at Brookvale that day.
I remember playing him. You wouldn't let anyone touch him.
No, but that day at Brookvale when the Melbourne Storm, and that was, what do they call it, the Battle of Brookvale.
Oh, yeah.
Georgie was on the bench, and I remember running across trying to get between Blairy and Stewart. And I look over my shoulder, here comes Georgie off the bench, and I'm thinking, and I actually remember jumping in front and saying, don't go, because this minute you cross that line, you're in a bit of trouble. So I probably saved him 2 or 3 weeks, so he probably owes me the payback of
Look, you might have, but I've also got a bone to pick with you on that one, because I was about to go on for Darcy Lussey.
Yeah.
And you come into my face, hold me back. I looked across here, the whole Storm bench ended up on the field while you were into me.
Yeah, but I still saved you 2 games.
You did, you saved me. But you grabbed the wrong bloke. I wasn't looking. I was looking for my ringside seats there.
And that's the thing with that. Like, I've been. You talk about, being part of it. That's a story. I mean, I got an iconic moment there. I've been on the field for some pretty cool things. Greg English try where he's pushing people off. You see, as he's running, to put the ball down, I'm sprinting on the outside there. Watching him put that ball down. So to be that close to some of the great moments in the game.
I've got a question for you on that one. Because the refs, I always love looking at the refs and touchies when they're chasing. You got a runaway try. Do you ever try to race the players? Like when you've got the Fox in open space and you're running down there to think, do you try to race them?
No, it's changed now. We used to. But we used to get in the way.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because we'd be saying, look how fast I am. And all of a sudden a player comes across to try and make a tackle and you're in their way. So we actually did a lot of drills on it. to try and get out of the way now in times where we pull up and let them go and have to go again and stuff like that. But yeah, I know we're used to.
Yeah, right. That's funny.
Touch judges do it. They do it coming back from goal line.
Yeah.
From conversions, they used to race.
Oh, they
back
try to race
in the
each
day.
other.
Yeah. So he was back first to the halfway line.
And obviously the atmosphere thing, right? Like the origins, the test matches, the semi-finals, the grand finals. You must feel the extra occasion there, or is it just...
I never got to do any of those big games. They wouldn't put me anywhere near them.
Wouldn't put you in there?
No, I didn't do an origin, didn't do a grand final, didn't do test matches.
Do some semis?
That is
Yeah,
a
I did some
shame.
semis. I went close to a grand final a couple of times. I reckon in my career, there's 1 year where I probably should have gotten a grand final. I reckon I was probably refereeing well enough to do it. And I reckon there's another year that I probably was, should have gotten an origin game. But that's life,
You
right?
get the chance.
But I look at that and I go, well, I still had a really long career, so I must have added something, to not do those games and to be around for as long as I was around. I must have added something to add value to that group. So I sort of hang my hat on that a bit.
Who was a ref that you liked while you were around?
As a referee?
Yeah.
I was lucky enough when I first come into first grade. I reckon it was the best bunch of NRL referees ever. Like the ones just before me, like it was Tim Mander, Bill Harrigan, Stephen Clark, Paul Simpkins, Sean
Great refs there,
Hampstead.
some of the best.
You know, man, you look at that group and they were all characters.
Yeah.
They were allowed to have personality and they were characters.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I fed off that a little bit coming through as a young fella. Well, I wasn't so young. I was 32 when I debuted. But as a younger referee coming in, I sort of was allowed to feed off that and have my own personality. I reckon if I was coming through now, it's a little bit different. The game's different. I might not have been able to have the same personality on the field.
No, well, everything's recorded too, isn't it? So you can't.
Yeah, I can't say some of the stuff that I used to say on the footy field.
Do you have a favourite ref that you watch now?
Oh, now?
That just does a good job and...
I think they all do a pretty good job. Like, like I said, it's a tough job and it's getting harder and harder. And the scrutiny on these referees now is insane. It's like it really concerns me about mental health issues going forward and stuff like that.
Shit,
Like I said, especially with social media. Like a lot of them don't have social media or they block their social media, just because death threats and stuff like that. Over a
ridiculous.
sport, which is But yeah, I just love watching. I reckon the game itself is really good at the moment. And so if that's the case, then I think the referees take some credit for that, right?
But what I reckon one of the biggest issues in our communities is our people's attitude, in the crowd especially, towards referees. And some of our players with their attitudes towards rugby league. Like for me, it's a game. I love the game. You play the game to enjoy it with your mates and stuff like that, where it's not a game to take hatred or anger into and play with that style, and you're getting sent off for poor play and ill discipline, and then crowds are overreacting. Like I love the passion that our mob have got, but the game dies without referees.
Absolutely.
And I think we've got to get to that point where it's just a no-go to ever argue with a ref and ever to go off or to be abusive towards a referee. Like, you just got to cop decisions. They're human. They make mistakes just like you make mistakes when you drop the ball and you miss tackles, and sometimes it's hard. Like, you got to bite your tongue and you got to hold your way. But I just don't agree with ever abusing referees, and particularly in junior football. I think it's one of the worst things I see in just all crowds that I go and watch when they're going off about that young referees for making mistakes. Like, that's one thing.
We really struggle, particularly in regional areas, for referees as well.
There'll be no game if there's...
And that's the thing. And I get it. Like, I play sports still, and I get frustrated at refs too, right? I think it's how you handle that. I don't have the greatest issue if in the moment you sort of have a little crack, but then you move on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And as long as it's not personal as well. Like, if it's a crack at the decision. So I think we go back to talking about my personality in the field. I don't think I ever took anything that anyone said to me personally. You know what I mean? Because if I did, I probably wouldn't be friends with you fellas. You know what I mean? Like on a footy field, I'm pretty sure there were times when I refereed you fellas and you had a crack.
I mean, George are model players here, mate. Come on, we never got angry.
Yeah, I mean, but I didn't take it personally. I took it when people had a crack at me, depending on what it was a crack at what I was wearing, not who I am. You know what I mean?
And the frustration of the decision.
And frustration. So I don't think that as a referee you should never have anyone ever approach or everyone, but it's how they do it, and it's how you respond to it afterwards as well as the player. You know what I mean? Like, the referees go out there and all they want to do is get everything right. We're not going to do it, mate. I made some terrible decisions in some NRL games, horrible decisions. And that's an elite level. That was someone who was full-time and paid to do it professionally. We see these kids who turn up on the weekends or just out there just to stay involved in the game that they love. And generally they're kids that couldn't play the game. You know, man, they're not great footballers, but they love rugby league. They want to stay involved and they want the opportunity to be part of a great game. And then we go out there and I look at it and I go, well, if that kid's working in Woolworths behind the counter and, you know, they do something, you're not going to yell and abuse them there, right? For me, the player part's one, and it's the crowd part. The crowd part is probably worse because you can control yourself. You're not out there in the emotion of it all. You know what I mean? And I talk about that with players, and I do a little bit of work with some players now around that stuff, right? And I look at it and I go, and you talk about the ill discipline of our players on the field. There's stuff in games where I go, I can understand. Like if I go to make a tackle and I accidentally go high and I get sin-binned or sent off, well, that's just a part of the game. That's unfortunate. But if I get sent off because I've abused the referee, well, that's something you've done, and that's something you've got to own. And if I'm a coach, especially we do a bit of work in development levels of footy coming through. If a kid is in a system that gets sent off for abusing a referee in a junior rep program, that's a 9-week program or 6-week program for our regional programs, and they get suspended for 2 or 3 weeks, that's a fair chunk of their season for something they could control. So I'm really trying to push that onto our players coming through and trying to have that bit of a generational change on players coming through to have an understanding that, abusing a referee actually could cost you, and even for a minor one, could cost you your career. You might not get your position back, and you might, you might be one of those blokes sitting in the pub going, I could have done that if it wasn't for that. So that's the change that we've got to make and sort of go, is it worth it?
So we talked about the negative impact of how you treat the referee and your actions toward the referee. What's the best way for a player to approach it? How do you butter up a referee the best way, and who is the best you've seen doing it?
No doubt Cameron Smith is the best. No doubt. And people always talk about him and say, oh, he's an extra referee. No, he was just the most professional rugby league person I've ever seen. So at the elite level, there are times when you can go to the referee and times when you can't. Right, so a lot of times you see players go to the referee and the referee brushes them. They go, oh, well, Cameron Smith gets to talk to him. He knows when he can go to the referee. He never comes in aggressively using, really like intimidating body language. So he's never going to get sent. He never swears. Right, he never swore when he comes to the referee, and he was educated. He knew what he was talking about. So you couldn't just brush him. You know what I mean? So he got more because he knew what he was doing. He was so professional. That's why he was, the captain of Melbourne Storm, who arguably at that time were the greatest rugby league team around. Penrith's probably taken them over the last couple of years. That Origin side that won 7 in a row, and then the Australian team that were unbeatable. And the reason why he was captain of those sides is because he was so professional. So that's the way to do it. It's about going educated. You get a lot of players, and they change the rule at the NRL where captains that just come up and just want to slow the game down because they're under the pump. So he was smart at when he came and what he did. But that's the best way to do it. Like I speak to players now around it, and if I've got a gripe at a referee, I'll never go to the referee when we've been penalised. You always go when you're getting something at a good field time or after you've just scored. So if you've just scored a try and you've got an issue out and go up and say, mate, they're up in our face a lot. You know what I mean? They look like they're getting, they're jumping early or something like that at a time when it's good time. You know what I mean? Where if we get penalised, then I go and the referee's going to brush you. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's about being smart with what you're doing and having a bit of education around the laws and stuff like that.
I'll tell you one thing I always used to do is when I started feeling myself getting a bit tired and I know that I was going to be pushing it on making that 10, I'd try and butter the ref up. I'd say, come on, mate, shorten it up a little bit there. You're getting over 10. I'd try and get a laugh out of them to try and get that, to look after me for that extra metre, because I know that there'll be at least 1 or 2 tackles out of that set where I might have been half a metre in front of him. So I'd try to butter him up to get him on side. But
that's a bit of it as well as a referee. If I saw a big fella in there make 3 tackles in a row and he's half a step offside, I'm not jumping into that. Yeah. Because I know he's worked out. And I know him being half a metre offside, he's not going to rush up off the line because he's knackered. Yeah. So it's going to have no impact on the game anyway. So if I then jump in and penalise him, I lose him for the rest of the game, right? He's like, I'm not going to work with you. So they're the skill sets as well.
Knockout.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. Let's talk knockout.
We're going to get there.
You've got a great history with the knockout, but tell us about your earliest memories of the knockout.
Yeah, so like I said, I played with Zetland, and I remember it's probably, would have been early 80s. Zetland won a couple of knockouts. I think Uncle Vic Wright was there and that.
Vic.
So they were
Side.
playing A grade, and I remember We used to go and watch all the A-grade games and we'd ball kids and stuff like that. And then when knockout come around in Kentucky Cup, remember the Kentucky Cup? It was a Wednesday night comp, and they all used to play in that. So I remember, growing up, I wasn't someone that was at the knockouts and stuff like that as a kid, but I remember when Zetland won those ones, we went and watched. And then a couple of years later, a few of those fellas went and played for Koori United, and I think they won one at Koori United, mid-'80s or something like that. So that's sort of my earliest knockout memories. As a kid, we were 12, 13-year-olds. I just remember, I have this vivid memory of, it might have been after the first Zetland, I can't remember if it was a Zetland knockout or when they won the first one, when the Koori United won, and we're at the Zetland Hotel. And I remember Big Vic Wright standing on top of the pool table celebrating. And he was just he was a massive human being, as a kid too. And I just remember going up there sort of sculling jugs of beer and stuff like that, and just how happy everyone was around that community then, and that was early days too, it wasn't nowhere near as big as it is now, but it still meant so much.
And you grew up right alongside a lot of the gun knockout players from Redfern, Wesley Patton and they said Darryl Trindle and some of them boys. Tell us about the guys you grew up with, because you would have seen, as you're, moving in the referees ranks, a lot of their careers starting to enhance and learning about the knockout and sort of increasing their knockout sort of participation and what they'd achieved in that.
Yeah, there's a funny story, but I remember my first knockout as an official, so I ran touchlines. I think it was Lapa were hosting it at Erskineville Oval. I think it might have been 92 or something like that, I think. And Lapa were playing, I was on the touchline. It was my first ever game in the knockout. I was just on the touch judge. And we're in the far corner of Erskineville Oval there, Trick was playing. And I made a decision, and I can't even remember what it was, but I heard these footsteps behind me, some fella out of the crowd. And as I turned, he swung a punch at me, right? And he was blind drunk, and he fell over the top of me, knocked himself out. So then, next to me, I'm just standing over the top of this fella who's laid out on the ground. His mates in the sideline thought I dropped him. So they start jumping the fence coming at me.
He's a tough little referee, this fella.
Yeah. And I was like that. You should have seen me as a kid. I was the skinniest little thing. And I'm standing over the top of this bloke like I've just dropped him. So they all jumped the fence. They're coming after me. And I'm just looking, going, what am I going to do here? And then Trick and Rodney Adler and all that, they all sort of started coming over to help me out. And then I remember then it was just turned in and all these people trying to get me. And I remember just had the flag in my hand. I was through it. I said, see you, I'm going home. And I just left. Like I
Didn't want to take it anymore.
And I thought, what am I doing? Yeah, why would I ever do that? So that was one of my first knockouts when Trick was playing. But and you talk about knockout play, you talk about Wes, right? And growing up with Wes was interesting. But watching Wes play footy and sort of watching his career for someone, the size that he was, and he was tiny, but how tough he played and how good he was, and particularly, I don't know if there's been a better knockout player than Wes, when it comes to winning knockouts and having an influence on games of rugby league. Wes was right up there.
And Wes played a big part in getting you to come back and referee as probably the first NRL ref to ever referee in a knockout. Would that be right to say?
Yeah, probably.
At that time.
Probably. I think I refereed. So I think the first time I sort of come back when I got to the NRL, Lewis Street Dodgers when they won the comp, and Jamie Dempsey and that, and they sort of rung me and said, "Oh, can you come and help us out, organising the refs and that, and do some refereeing?" And then I sort of refereed here and there throughout for the rest of it. But yeah, Wes was part of that as well. So.
I remember Wes used to always say for when he had the memorial team in that Gavin Badger's going to referee every game that we play, and you did referee every game.
I refereed a couple of games. I lost a lot of friendships that year at Henson Park there, All Blacks and.
And what he was saying, it wasn't that you were biased towards him. It was just that he knew that you would referee the game properly, and it was going to be
down the line.
Yes.
Done properly. The standard was going to be high, and he wanted the most professional.
Yeah, and when I was helping out for a couple of years there, organising the refs and that's what I tried to do. And over that long weekend, there were times where we had 4 or 5 NRL referees refereeing, or New South Wales Cup referees or fringe NRL referees. There was 5 or 6 at times. It's a bit harder now to do it, But that was always my goal, to try and get the best quality referees we could get there for that weekend, because when you get those big games, there isn't a more intense game of rugby league anywhere in the world.
What makes for a good knockout referee then?
It's really hard. It's really hard to be a good knockout referee. It's like I said, I refereed that game, and I've heard you fellas talk about it on here, the Waterloo Storm and the Memorial side at Henson Park. That is the toughest, hardest, scariest game of rugby league I've ever refereed in my life. And I've refereed NRL for 370 games, and no NRL game I've ever refereed, it was as hard as that one. Wow. Because of the intensity of it all and how much it means. And like I said, I lost some friendships out of it for a couple of years, where people didn't talk to me because of that game, because of that, the perception that I was looking after Wes. But on the Waterloo Storm side, I had people that I grew up with as well, and some really good mates. John Boy Carr played in that game, who didn't talk to me for years. I went onion picking with him and his family when we were kids at school, you know what I mean? I love John Boy. And
Chock, you was there alongside when Wes chased Chock down?
Yeah, Chock.
Did you think he was going to get him, little Wesy?
Nah, once Chock, I thought it was all over when Chock went through.
I never seen Wes more determined in his life to run someone down when Chock made that break. And I think, look, the game was on the line too.
Yeah, it was tight. That
Changed
changed the momentum. You talk about momentum changes, that was one of them, right? Because I think everyone assumed once Chock went through, that was game over.
Wes was not going to let Chock score that try.
But they were.
I can't wait to ask Chock about it. It's going to
be that footy side, like that Memorial side, was good. But so that whoever won that game was going to win that.
That Zetland team at Lee Hookie and Andrew Roberts was at his prime.
Well, I put Pom in the bin. Earlier, same thing. I grew up with Pom.
It wasn't rare for Pommy to go to the bin, though.
But in all honesty, it was when I did it, it was almost a little bit for his personal safety as well. And he's the toughest. Like he's, he doesn't need to be protected. But if he stayed on the field, it would have been. He was just killing people.
Fiery characters in there. Yeah. What about some other games, knockout, that stood out for you that you can remember referencing?
That's a big one. I remember. I don't know if it was the same knockout. We had that the sit-in for Nathan Merritt come back from the Prime Minister's 13 game. We had the sit-in. And I remember
that was a famous old one. That one,
because I was meant to referee the game that was about to go, and I remember sitting up. We're up at Henson Park in the back room at the top, and Tony Mundine was in there with us, and we were talking how we'd organised at that time. We were going to go up to Marrickville Oval and play the game when no one knew. Just take the two teams up there and go and play the game, and then come back, and they're still sitting on the field not knowing what's going on, because we had to get it done. And that's something that I remember sitting up in that back room and we're all going, we've got this covered. Marrickville County, they've given us the ground. And then all of a sudden, I forget who went out there, and someone went out there and they ended up getting off the field, so we got the game going. But that was a good one. I try. It's funny because when I was at Knockouts, I tried to give everyone else the opportunity to referee the big games. I didn't want to do them. The only one I ever really did that was a big one was that one, because I didn't think anyone else would be able to. I knew how and I didn't want to do that.
That
was a heavy one.
I really didn't want to do it because of the friendships I had out there, and I knew that one team was going to lose and someone was going to, I know what it gets like. But I thought, if I don't, but like I said, I think that game, I don't think I've done a lot of NRL games by that, and I think that made me as an NRL referee. So I'm sort of glad that I did it in the end.
I remember talking to Steve Clark, and particularly the Dubbo knockouts, when he was running a lot of the referees out there, and he said it was the best place to put young, aspiring NRL refs into was at the knockout, because of the passion and intensity was going to give them a feel about what the pressure would be like when they referee NRL. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I can tell off the back of, and it's exactly right. I do a little bit of ref coaching now, and I like to get a few of the kids that are coming through from our junior rep squads and stuff like that, and our grade squads, and put them into those, because I work out pretty quickly if they can referee or not. You work out really quickly if they can handle a tough knockout game. They can handle an NRL.
Because that intensity, like when you see top teams go up against each other in the knockout, it's there from the first second. It's the first tackles. You can see that this is going to be war here, and it must be hard. And would it be surprising? Is it surprising from a lot of refs? The ones that go there for the first time, what's the feedback? What do they say to you? Because I know as players who haven't played in it before, and they could be great players in A-grade, NRL systems, even NRL players can be great players, and they go to the knockout and they go, I've never played football like that. I've never been in something like that, it shocks them when they first get in it. Is it the same for referees?
Yeah, very much so. So generally on the Thursday night, I get them all together and have a chat with them about what knockout footy is and what it means, and how it's probably best officiated. Because one of the big things for me, so the Friday of the knockout, I try and have as many Indigenous refs as I can. My goal is that Friday's refereed by all Indigenous refs.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I'd love the whole knockout to be, but it's never going to happen, right? Because the quality of football is way above what we have out there.
At the moment.
But the and I try and get a couple of the refs that have been around for it, and some of our Indigenous refs that we get in there to talk about what knockout means and that as well, just to have an understanding, firstly, of what the knockout is for some of these people that come in that have no idea and they just come to referee a footy carnival. So that sort of gets them back a little bit when we talk about the history and why it's just so important. And then I try and, so we got a young kid coming through. He's not so young anymore, but Billy Greatbatch,
Yep.
Who's from Orange originally, he gets knockout footy.
Yep.
Right, he gets it. We put him. He's in systems, in refereeing Ron Massey Cup and stuff like that. I reckon he referees better when he's at the knockout than when he does because he doesn't think so much. You know what I mean? He knows what he has to do and what he stays out of and stuff like that. I get Billy to talk to him to give him an understanding of sometimes a tackle across the jaw is play on. Sometimes it's a penalty depending on the situation of the game. A knockout, you know what I mean? Like, and depending on how hard it is and stuff like that. And sometimes a shot by a player is play on as opposed, you know what I mean? Like it's different. You just got to, you got to have a really good skill set to referee knockout footy.
With our young refs, and what is the advice you'd give to them about what they need to try and make that jump to? What are we lacking? What are our young refs lacking?
I think we lack numbers to start with. I think the more we have, the more likelihood. And I think a big part of that is as mob, we don't tend to drift towards roles that are in positions of power, cops, and all that stuff. In any sport, and, even in the AFL, our Indigenous participation numbers are massive. We don't have a lot of umpires in that sport. Same in the league, right? So it's about just getting numbers and just having a crack. But then when we get in, in the last couple of years, I've tried to run some camps and stuff with Indigenous referees, and it's just about being committed to it. You've got to be committed to it, and I think that's the biggest problem. I talk a lot when I do talks to kids and stuff like that, and I've never made a sacrifice for what I do. I made choices. Right? I don't call them I call them choices. Right? I make the choice to not go to a party. I make the choice to not go to a wedding because I've got footy and stuff like that. They're the choices I make to be successful in what I do. I don't think a lot of our young fellas coming through want to do the same thing. I think, I'll get phone calls. I can't referee this weekend because it's my cousin's best mate's 21st. Yeah. You know what I mean? Well, if you want to be successful, you can't go to that.
Yeah, it's the same sacrifices you make as a footballer
Exactly
too, isn't
right.
it? You want to make it.
And I don't feel like a lot of the kids coming through want to do that.
What about, I know in a lot of communities that it'd be hard to put your hand up to referee because you got to run into them same blokes at the pub on a Friday night. You don't want to cop it, or you don't want them looking at you funny, or you don't want your mob looking at you differently because you're refereeing games, and sometimes they're going to lose to their rivals, and you're out in the middle, and it's what natural happens is people blame the ref a lot. They don't want to take accountability for it. What's your advice to young fellas who might have to deal with some of that stuff, and how do they navigate that?
Yeah, that's hard for me to talk about because I never had to. Oh, I sort of did.
You're in Redfern. I was thinking you're in one of the hardest.
I sort of did when I think back on it now. But, I don't know. I didn't even think about that, I just went out to do my best each week and I hope that was good enough. But I think if you can walk off the field knowing that you did everything fair, no matter what happened, and I have no doubt that every game of rugby league I've walked off, I've refereed it to the best of my ability and not mattered who was on either side. I think then you can sort of walk away pretty sweet. And I know it's hard in those regional areas to do that. Take it to the next level. In Papua New Guinea, people get killed, referees get killed because their hometown gets beat. Like, that's what happens over there. If you referee the hometown, and a lot of the refs over there are coppers
they have a real lack of referees in Fiji and for that reason.
And that's what it is. So in those countries, in those Polynesian countries, we really struggle because of that, because you referee your hometown and it's all town-based, right? And they lose, you got to go back there. And I reckon that happens a bit in regional areas, but I don't know how we change that.
So if we're talking recruitment, what's the type of person that should be considering looking at refereeing, or what sort of background should you have to look to get into that space?
Yeah, I'm not too, like, I'm not going to say I broke the mold, but I was very different. Like, when I started refereeing, I couldn't tell you how many times people said, you're never going to be successful because of who you are, where you come from. Right, so, and like I said, it was coppers, school teachers, it was people sort of in that, and, you know, I mean, I did things that, you know, when I first got into it, so I wore red boots in a game. I was the first referee to wear non-black boots in the game, and I was virtually told if I wear them again, I'll be in reserve grade. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was that's what it was like back then. And you had to have black. Your boots had to be like painted black, and you had to have brand new white laces every time. That wasn't me.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I couldn't. Firstly, I couldn't afford it. You know what I mean? I only played footy because it was free in the South area. You know, I'm a single mum. I couldnn't afford boot polish to paint my boots. I had old second-hand boots my mum bought from second-hand store. You know what I mean? And one year in park football, I had blue boots because that's the ones my mum bought me, and I got in trouble. I had to paint them black because that was refereeing. So I think that's changed, obviously, over time now. But I don't think there's a particular person. But what I think we need to look at, and especially for our young fellas coming through, when I started refereeing, it was a hobby.
Yeah.
Right. Then in 2005, so I just started refereeing. I refereed my first grade game in 2004. 2005 became full-time professional. Now it's a career.
Yeah.
Now literally top referees earning $350,000 a year.
$350,000 a year, you can have.
If you're refereeing grand finals, origins, all that in the same year, because you're on a wage, and then there's bonuses for all those. You can earn up to $350,000 a year. Like the bottom tier referees are earning close to $200,000.
Yeah.
Like, I look at that and I go, you know, for something that you can do on the side as you're coming through and put a bit of time and effort into it, and then at some stage that could be a career. You know, you're earning money as good as and a lot more than, you know, the base wage of NRL players, and you're not waking up sore on Monday.
Yeah.
So I look at players that are coming through pathways and then sort of get dropped out, you know, your 20s and stuff like that. Like, if I was one of those coming through now, it's something I'd seriously consider, because the NRL will actually give you more opportunities if you come out of playing.
You could earn more than playing.
And you could earn more in the playing, and you're not waking up sore. And
there's a lot of local A-grade boys, that are athletic
like that,
and fit.
You know, that understand the game.
Go and do refereeing. Get some money there, women's.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. So in the female space, we had a surge a couple of years ago when Casey and Belinda started refereeing NRL.
Yeah.
We're sort of struggling a bit now with the girls, because the girls can play all the way through now.
Yeah.
When Casey started refereeing, she had to stop playing when she was 13.
Yep.
And there was no footy, and then she couldn't play again until she was 18, until she played A grade. So in that time in between, she got a referee's ticket, and she started refereeing at 17 or 18. And she talks about it now. If the pathway's there with the Tasha Gale, Lisa Fiola competitions and all that went out, she would never have taken up refereeing.
Yeah.
So we're competing with that with the girls now. They used to come across and referee.
Yeah, of course.
Now they're all playing still, so you know, it's another avenue that we sort of really need to push in. But yeah, the Indigenous and Polynesians, we have very minimal referees, and that's something that I'm sort of trying to work on at the minute.
So for anyone that we're poking a little bit of a bear here, who might be getting a bit interested in maybe this could be a pathway, what's the process look like for them to become a ref? How long does it take for them to become it, and what's the process for them to get started?
Yeah, so it changes all the time, the process to become a referee, but you do an online part. It takes about 40 minutes, I think. And then there's a face-to-face off the back of that. So you have to do it online first, and you're registered to go and do a face-to-face course, about 2.5 hours, and then you're ready to go on the field.
So you're ready for your first
So
ref, and then you just grow from there. So you could get it knocked over in a weekend. So someone could watch this podcast right now,
referee this weekend,
jump online straight after it, go and meet Gav,
and might say Georgie
meet
Rose
someone, and they could be reffing this weekend.
Georgie Rose at the junior league here, representing, getting in there and reffing.
But I also say it to like parents and stuff that are, at footy every week with their kids and that anyway. Why not? And I talk about young players coming through pathways and stuff that have some abilities to get your referees to learn the rules, because you can't manipulate what you don't know as well.
Yeah.
And in better football, you see some of these footballers now, especially outside backs and stuff, that understand the sideline laws and foot out when they're touching the ball and stuff like that. It makes them better players. Like Wayne Bennett he knows the rules inside and out. That's why he's such a good coach as well. Like, he's a great man manager, but he knows the laws. You know what I mean? Tim Sheens used to ring us at the refs every week and go, "We're doing this. I just want to make sure your refs know the rules."
Yeah,
he was telling us the rules.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That you can't manipulate them to, So and it takes away some frustration as well. So some of my stuff when I was with Madge at the Tigers and sitting up at the back of the box, and you'd be blowing up about ref decisions, and I'd be like, Madge, it's actually right. You know what I mean? Well, it takes a bit of the sting out then. So instead of worrying about that, now concentrate on the next thing. So that helps as well if you understand it. Like I look at it for me, and like I've got all the coaches' qualifications. Like if I want to be the best at something, I've got to know everything about it.
Yeah.
So not only do I want to know everything about refereeing, I want to know everything about rugby league, and I think it's the same for players.
Now, with your view from a referee point of view, I want you to tell us for our young players that are out there that are coming through the knockouts, what is it that you want to see from them that will help them progress through the pathway?
You know what? And we've spoken about it a bit. Just being disciplined, because if you're disciplined, it's everything you do, right? And that'll transfer into your life as well.
Can you see when you're watching a game of footy out there, and I watch the same thing, and some of our young boys, that discipline's going to be the thing that holds this young kid back. And I can see it in the way he's playing out there at the knockout. He's just a little bit reckless. He's a little bit too worried about mouthing off and hitting blokes and getting revenge than actually playing the game and getting on with things and brushing it off. Do you see that? And do you feel, because you work in the pathways as well for playing, then do you see that this is an area we need to get right?
I see it all the time. I mean, that's been happening forever, right? There's some of the best, when I was as a kid even, coming through, some of the most talented footballers have never made it because of discipline. You know what I mean? On and off the field. And it transfers into everything. Like I said, if you're disciplined on the field, you'll be disciplined off it. And I see kids all the time, great footballers. I think it was a knockout I was watching a kid down the South Coast there, that first year back, our knockout back, and he was playing in the 13s.
Chase.
What's that one on South?
The one who scored the mad try.
Right foot then left foot, chip chase.
But there was a kid in that in that team who I thought was a better player, but he was and I remember speaking to his dad afterwards. I said, mate, like, this kid could be anything, but what's going to ruin him is the way he carries on. Because after he made a tackle, he wanted to push players, and he wanted to try and be the hard kid. But if I'm a pathways coach and I'm watching that, I'm going, well, that's too much hard work. Because there might be a kid that's nearly as good or just as good, but I go, well, I can work more with this kid than that kid. You know what I mean? That's what they've got to understand. That when you want to get into these pathway systems, there's 50 other kids in your position.
Yeah,
right?
It's very competitive.
And the minute you stuff it up, they'll just put someone else in. They don't care. Like these NRL clubs and that, not in a bad way. When I say they don't care, it's just that they don't have the time to muck around. If they've got someone else that they know is just as good, they'll take them in a heartbeat. And that's what we try and teach into these young kids coming through our pathways. Indigenous kids is discipline. That's understanding that wearing the right gear to the training session and being on time. It doesn't matter how good a footballer you are. If you don't do that in those pathway systems, they're not going to pick you.
And you've obviously been involved. You're the manager of the Indigenous All-Stars team as well. You can see that discipline that the boys have, don't they? That gives them, when they play, that gives them the opportunity to play at that level, but also to win and be successful and progress their careers.
You fellas know, as well as anyone, that what you see on the Sunday for the 80 minutes, there's so much that goes into that. There's a lot of natural talent, but that's just not just all natural talent, right? That's just constant working on their crafts. And those boys, like I watch when we come into camp and we muck around with the footy and that, and some of the skill level and how good they are. That doesn't come from just being a natural athlete. That comes from practice. You know what I mean? And continually doing the basics. And I didn't realise how much until I started on the other side and working with NRL clubs, how much of training is based on just doing basic stuff repetitively. So it just becomes a muscle memory, like the basic drills you do with an under-13 side. So, I've got a grandson who's playing under-13s at the moment, and I go to their training sessions. All the stuff they're doing is exactly the same stuff they're doing at NRL clubs. They just do it better. It's just, all the basic stuff.
All the basics.
And I think that's it, you know what I mean? It's just making sure that you're getting all that stuff and continually working on the reps of everything and not just thinking, well, I'm good. I'm just going to get better.
What would you change about the game?
I sort of, at the moment, I wasn't the biggest fan of 6 more. It's sort of grown on me a bit because I think refs, I think it gets overused a bit. I think they manipulate, it can be manipulated a bit as a referee. You can manipulate it and wait until the team gets outside 40 and then, so the game doesn't stop. But yeah, it's grown on me a bit. And I like that they changed it when it was Penrith won a comp particularly the first comp they won off the back of sort of pushing the edge on first tackle and yardage, because if it's 6 more, it's only 1 extra tackle, but we've already bashed you backwards and your set's already dead. And they did it legally, like it wasn't illegal. They were just too smart. They outplayed everybody else in manipulating when the 6 more first came in. Then they changed it. But no, I think the game at the moment is in a great spot. I'm loving watching rugby league at the minute.
Always love it.
Any recommendations for the host of the knockout? What they could do to improve the product up there, working with the young kids? Because I don't like the ill discipline I see with the young kids. Yeah. They're all running in to bully each other and pick on each other. And I remember when I was a kid and I went to the knockout, and it was about tough football, but I played knockout at 15. Yeah. I played against Maury Boomerangs at 15 years of age. I ain't running in to push anyone around back then as a 15-year-old kid. So I learned to play hard, but I learned also that you don't go running in, you don't go mouthing off at people, you earn your respect with hard, disciplined play. But now, because they're only 15 and 17-year-olds, they're playing each other, and sometimes they're playing little guys. And I feel some of the big fellas are trying to stand over everyone out there and bully and push. They love pushing around and stuff like that and cheap shot. And I'd rather them just play tough, disciplined footy. That's what I had to learn when I first come into the knockout.
Yeah, it's a hard one, but I like to see, like, because the knockout means so much, right? We wait all year for it. But if you get suspended in a knockout, it's like the suspension's in club footy. And I go, well, if you get suspended in knockout, should you not be allowed to play in the next one? Because that would have more impact, right?
Yeah.
I think I'd rather miss 4 weeks, 5 weeks of park footy than miss the knockout, right? So that's something that we might be able to look at going down the track, but
we've gotten better in that area.
It's in place now. That rule's in place now.
Yeah, because that makes a big difference, right? Because the knockout means so much.
It's hard to run a knockout when there's brawls on teams and it goes overboard. We know the boys get a bit fiery out there, and we all love to take each other on and things, but you shake hands, you quit it there, and you don't go overboard with it. Yeah. It's the ones that go overboard and make a big scene and make things, which brings the ugly side of the knockout. We know we're going to cop it in the media, or people are just going to talk about that. That's what puts it all at risk, because they'll pull the pin on the knockout. The police can pull the pin on it.
And you know what I mean? It's such a big event too, right? Like it's huge, and I don't know how you do it. Like it's a massive event to be run over those couple of days and fit everything in and keep everyone happy, right? And you're right about that. Like, so that knockout up at Raymond Terrace, the Newcastle All Blacks one, it was a really well-run knockout and a really nice night. It was really good. But all everyone's talking about is that fight, right? And media get onto it and stuff like that. And people are always looking to bring us down, right? Always looking for anything to go, The same thing happened, when through COVID, when you had the Tribal League. Yeah. And it's such a great concept, and it was really good footy. And I remember, a couple of different venues, and we moved it around, and then there was one fight, which was a good thing, where it was a one-on-one.
Shook hands after it.
Everyone stayed out, let the two boys settle their differences. But then, same thing, all the talk out of, and not how good the footy was, and not how good we got some rugby league back into some communities off the back of COVID. But everyone's talking about, and we've got to be better than that too, right? We've got to understand that when we're doing these things, that, you're not only are you, it's not just yourself out there playing knockout footy that's going to get suspended, but it's the whole of the knockout and the whole of our community that's going to be all over social media and stuff like that. So I don't know how we fix it, but we have to.
It's something maybe that our mob's not used to. Like back in the days, we'd settle everything there right then and there on the footy field. You're told you stand up for yourself, you shake hands after it. It's a good thing. But now we're scrutinised.
There's no social media.
Social media. There's
so it doesn't end there.
As soon as it happens, everyone grabs a phone.
Regardless, it doesn't end there, does it? It's dragged out by everyone else.
And there's a reputation of the host of the whole carnival. Us as a group of people are being judged, and it's unfair, but it's reality, right? Like we've got to all sort of strive to be better in every way, to show the best product, because I look at the potential of opportunities that we could have for this knockout with bigger sponsors, 100%. Bigger programs, people to watch more, and who knows, we can get it on higher platforms, on Foxtel and things like that. So if we're going to do that, we've got to show the best of our culture, the best of our communities, and we need everyone to buy in. The refs, the players, the little teams, the big teams, everyone to make that the better product. And more money comes into it, the more opportunities for our kids. That's what I keep thinking. We put better rep teams in, we can support our local clubs better, and even knockout teams be, more professional. And that's when we'll get our kids going through the pathways. And
Even the things like, I remember, might have been 2014, when World Cup year and there was no All-Stars game. We had that Gems game where they picked some players out of the knockout and some players out of the Murray Carnival. And I actually refereed against the Newcastle Knights, a trial game. Opportunities like that, right? Off the back of that, we can, maybe look to just continually, because it's such a big event now and it's so professionally run now. It's not like, it's more than a carnival now. You know what I mean? The knockout's more than a rugby league. It's an event that needs to be well run and needs to be continually upskill. And like the professionalism over the last couple of years is through the roof, right? And we've set some standards now that hopefully continues along, because for those particular reasons that we need this to be. We're fortunate in rugby league that we have this. You know what I mean? No other sport in this country has. I don't know anywhere has something that's a cultural event that's so huge that is based around one particular sport. You know what I mean? So we need to make sure that that it's here for another 50, another 100 years. You know what I mean? Because if we don't, like the way sports going and stuff like that, it's quite easy if it's not run professionally and we don't continually tick all the boxes. We can't just do it, blackfella way in the past and go, oh yeah, don't worry about it, we'll just get it done. It's all got to be ticked off because it only takes one thing and it's not there next year.
We'll finish on a good one. What's the thing that you love most about the knockout?
I just love the connection. You know what I mean? I do a lot of talks around, and whether it be around with Indigenous fellas or non-Indigenous fellas, I think life's about connecting. And the more connections you have, I talk about my life now, right? I'm pretty lucky with a lot of the stuff that I've got to do, but I didn't get to do, and I didn't get these opportunities based on skill sets because I don't really have any. I left school when I was 15. You know what I mean? I wasn't an educated person. I worked some of the worst jobs you could ever imagine to get by when I was younger. But I get these opportunities because of connections I made throughout my life. You know what I mean? Continually connect, and that's what the knockout does, right? I get to catch up with people that I haven't seen for a long time. I bump into people that I didn't know that I knew, or other people know and family know, and I get to see some of the best rugby league talent in the world play for, because they want to play, not because they're playing for money. I think that's the biggest part of it, that we're playing because you love rugby league, you love community, and it sort of takes, especially the professional players that come back, it takes them back to why they play the game.
Yeah, 100%.
Who's the best players you're seeing? Knockout.
I spoke about Wes before. I think Wes is a game changer, but I reckon one of the best I've seen was PJ when he played in that Memorial side. He was relentless.
PJ Jensen.
Yeah,
unbelievable. You left him.
Yeah, he was relentless when he played. Like he just kept. And a big fella too, right? So he had the side,
all day,
but he just kept going. PG was good.
I think Page is a good example of how to play tough without overstepping the
100%.
line.
I don't think I ever had to talk to PJ, or ever saw him,
all the good players. You never had to penalise George Rose.
Dennis.
You never have to penalise Dennis Moore. And
Dennis was the same.
They don't do those things. George was one of the toughest players to play, and he never dog-shotted anyone, never cheap-shotted anyone. And I think there's a lot of young fellas out there that are growing up with this misconception that to be a tough knockout player that you got to give, be wild and have everyone fearing you. No one fears anyone who head shots and dog shots and that. Like, you fear the big fella who's just going to keep coming at you all day and run hard, or the Dennis Moore will keep going, the PJ Jensen. Like, that's what a tough knockout player is.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
What about teams and your favourite knockout teams, or the teams that you really admired at the knockout? Anyone stand out?
Yeah, I remember that knockout down, one of the knockouts at Hanson Park, the Dungutty side was like all young. There was a couple of old fellas and a couple of young. I can't even remember who was in it, but I remember watching them one game and I thought, that's a good footy side. Watching Tinga play was always good as a young fella coming through. But recently, obviously, WAC and over the last couple of years have put together a really good mix of a side. Some young fellas who got, I remember the first year I watched Joshy Seagwalt play with you fellas, and I thought,
Trell.
Joshy's
the older brother.
Yeah, Trell, sorry. And I thought, this kid's got something. I remember speaking to, I was at South at the time, speaking to a few of the boys there about him, and they were saying he'll play first grade, this kid, probably. And he's in the pathway now at the Broncos.
Yeah.
So, and the mix with, watching Benny Barber still do his thing, he could still play NRL. Like, it's a shame that he's not playing NRL because one of my favourite players, watching Benny play. I think, War putting together a good program, not just not just a good side. They're putting a good program. I think Moree are starting to put together a good program again as well, where it's not just about rugby league and it's not just about knockout. It's about giving back to community and building.
I like it, Badge.
Building some stuff. So I'm really enjoying those 3 programs at the moment.
No, well, we appreciate you coming on and sharing a different perspective. I think of rugby league and the knockout. I think what you've achieved over your time is something for a lot of people to aspire to, and I think you've set a standard for what a future great Aboriginal NRL ref can aspire to be. So
we need the next one. We need the next ref. We know we can't have just Badge the first to last everything here.
Actually, I'll put a kid on notice at the minute. There's a kid up in Northern Rivers, Lincoln Close, who I think could do it. But when I spoke before about having to put the time and effort in, that's where he lacks.
Yeah,
and I'll put him on that link. Ripping,
Discipline,
I reckon if he has a fair crack at it, he's got the potential to be quite successful.
Come on, brother, let's
we'd love
do
to
it,
see it. There it is, 100%. All right, well, thanks for coming on, Badge. Good luck in the future, and we'll see you around, no doubt, at the knockout and everywhere supporting Indigenous rugby league the way you do. That's the Koori Knockout Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Catch us next week.